I have three big keys for investing that I look for when I bet everything. Because I get asked that all the time, right? What do you think of gold? What do you think of Bitcoin? So the first is it needs to be a real asset, right? Gold's a real asset, real estate's a real asset. Um, Owning Lululemon stock where the CEO says something stupid and now the stock tanks, it's not a real asset. The next thing, it's got to cash flow, right? And that's the basis of my philosophy. It's got to create streams of income today so I can retire today, as opposed to accumulation theory is what most people live by, where they build up 2 million or 4 million. I hear now it's 8 million in your account, and now you can withdraw it at a certain rate, right, to retire on your dying days. So we want to create cash flow today. And then the last one is being able to leverage it, right? Real estate, it's all three of them.
Man of Mastery podcast episode 78, Simple Passive Cash Flow with Lane Kawaoka. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I appreciate you guys being here. As always, thank you so much for your time. I think you're going to love this one today. If you've been around the show for a bit, you know how much integrated training and integrated development plays a part in the mastery journey. And it's not just training the body or even training mental toughness. And we talk about developing or honing your intuition and working on emotional control. When we talk about integrated human development, it also has to encompass what's such a big part of our lives, work, right? Work and what we pursue professionally, what we do financially. So fueling our mind, particularly as it comes to wealth building, wealth management, whether that's for your future or future generations or ways that you're going to give back to the world and serve the world, we have an obligation to understand, to develop, to learn. And I've been around the real estate game for a long time. I know some of you guys have as well. I still learned a ton from today's guest. Lane shares how he started building passive cash flow in a specific rental real estate formula to quit his day job, right? To build up that level of recurring passive income that gave him financial freedom. And he espouses this philosophy of live where you like, but invest where it works. Well, he leads from the front on that. And he breaks down some real specifics about how he's using the power of leverage. We know about that. The power of certain investment classes or real estate classes, and then some amazing tax breaks that I didn't even know about. We all know about the common ones that we use, or maybe that we use in single family rental homes, but he's got some great stuff in here. And he's pretty generous about sharing his specific types of target markets, types of target real estate, and metrics on how he evaluates good rental markets or good rental properties. Even talks about don't look for problem properties, look for sellers with problems that you can help solve as a buyer. So there's all kinds of good stuff in here. And that being said, I won't go on any further. Let's cut over and listen to this one on Simple Passive Cash Flow with Lane Kawaoka. All right, hey guys, today my guest Lane runs the Simple Passive Cash Flow podcast and website. His mission is to help hardworking professionals out of the rat race. Lane, welcome. I don't want to slaughter your last name, so please say it for me, and thank you for being on today.
Yeah, so people can Google me at Lane Simple Passive Cash Flow, or Lane Kawaoka is my last name. But yeah, thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. Tell me a little bit more about your bio and your background in passive cash flow and real estate.
Yeah, so I currently own 3,500 units, mostly apartment units. I focus on workforce housing, so B and C class in secondary and tertiary markets where we cash flow. But it wasn't always like that. I started investing in 2009 with a little single family home as I was working my engineering job that I didn't really care for. Bought a house to live in because that was what everybody said you're supposed to do, and rented it out. And that was where I discovered this world of passive cash flow. And that was, kind of that was the start of it all.
Nice. Yeah, let's dig in on that. I mean, I think so. For a little bit more background on my show, and you and I were talking off air a little bit. So this journey of mastery, sort of what we look to do in building ourselves as better humans across our life. A lot of times we spend talking about physical, mental, emotional, spiritual things like that. But of course, uh, we have careers, and wealth building and wealth management is a big portion of how we set ourselves up in life. So I love this topic. I always like to explore different ideas for passive income. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. When just to ask, because I want to get clear, when people say, for example, I own 3,500 units, is that you, Lane, that owns those? You're part of an organization or a fund, or what does that really look like?
Yeah, so a lot of accredited investors, or what we call this private equity space, people like myself will go into. I think I'm probably in like a couple dozen deals at the very least where you own a couple dozen apartment complexes. I own my fractional share, and doing this, I diversify over different geographic locations, different partners, different asset classes, and it's a great way to get pieces of bigger deals, and you cut out all the middlemen. Right? This is the country club deals, right? Nobody really golfs anymore or goes to the country club. But yeah, this is what you would think of 1980s country club.
I don't know, when you say that, I think Caddyshack. When you say 1980s, so are you're Hawaii based? Is your investing all Hawaii based, or
Yes, so
domestic, international?
I subscribe to the whole live where you want, but invest where the numbers make sense. So Hawaii, California. I used to live up in Seattle. No bueno. Numbers don't work. Um, it is if you want to go for appreciation and gamble, but from the start, I've always been straight cash flow, right? Because I'm trying to build up enough passive income. So my past goal was to quit my day job, and you can't do that with appreciation. You can't eat appreciation. And to me, I think investing for cash flow is a lot more prudent. So I think people think of real estate investing. They think of house flipping, wholesaling houses. I don't do any of that. I'm buy and hold, passive investing.
Nice. Yeah, to me, that's the difference between speculation and investment. And so let's talk a little bit about. I know a lot of people, as they build their income and then they build their wealth, the the I guess the common playbook is you jam it into a 401k or an IRA type of plan, and at some point you got a big enough fund that maybe you've got a wealth manager either through the qualified plan or you go out on your own. And there's a pretty standard playbook there as well. Not a ton of maybe creativity. And so we all sort of know the old adage about following the herd. So I love to talk about ideas that are a little more maybe contrarian. So in what ways would you think of yourself as contrarian or different than the standard wealth playbook?
Yeah, so I'm glad I'm in a safe place here, right? Because normally when I start spewing this stuff, people are like, they think it's too alternative, right? But yeah, I don't invest in Wall Street. I don't have any mutual funds. I got rid of that stuff a long time ago. I don't even really believe in Roth IRAs, 401ks, all that stuff that everybody said you're supposed to do. We can kind of get into the details later, but um, to me, there's nothing more prudent than owning individual properties or syndication placements, where I think the key is you're working with directly with the operator, or you're the operator itself. That's in I think the thing that's a problem with the Wall Street is there's so many middlemen taking cuts, right? The financial planner is probably one of the worst folks in this stream, right? So, you know, we like to invest in these alternative, and it's crazy. It's called alternative assets, right? But this is like real estate. Like there's nothing more real than traditional than owning these properties. I think a lot of things that people don't realize is like mutual funds, all these type of stock offerings. They weren't really around until like the 1980s, 1990s, and the average American didn't really have access to invest in these paper assets. It wasn't until I'll say that the government and all these Vanguards, Fidelities, all these big brokerages got in cahoots to create a 401k. which now allow these big companies to get access at the average man's dollar.
Yeah, I guess to maybe draw a parallel to that, I had somebody call me recently and ask what I thought about buying gold, and we had a little bit of a conversation about it. But I said one thing to realize is there's a difference between buying a physical metal, whether or not you take delivery or have it vaulted or something like that, or an ETF, which is a highly leveraged, not physically backed um, virtual scheme, really.
It's the high corn or high fructose corn syrup of like owning real assets,
Yeah, there you go.
right? And let's break that down, right? Like I have three big keys for investing that I look for when I bet everything, because I get asked that all the time, right? What do you think of gold? What do you think of Bitcoin? So the first is it needs to be a real asset, right? Gold's a real asset, real estate's a real asset. Um, Owning Lululemon stock where the CEO says something stupid and now the stock tanks, it's not a real asset. The next thing, it's got to cash flow, right? And that's the basis of my philosophy. It's got to create streams of income today so I can retire today, as opposed to accumulation theory is what most people live by, where they build up 2 million or 4 million. I hear now it's 8 million in your account, and now you can withdraw it at a certain rate, right, to retire on your dying days. So we want to create cash flow today, and then the last one is being able to leverage it, right? Real estate, it's all three of these. I mean, the type of loans we get, it's cheap, right? The government wants us to do this. Whereas gold, right, is real asset. I'll give them that, but it doesn't cash flow, it doesn't produce income for you. You can't really leverage it too. To me, gold is more of an end game strategy. When your net worth is $4 or $5 million, cool, you can knock yourself out with gold. But I see too many people with under $250,000 net worth having bullion. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you got to grow your net worth, right?
Yeah, in fact, that was kind of the first comment that I had, sort of along those lines when I got that phone call. Is gold might not be a bad idea if you're thinking about it the right way. I wouldn't think about it as an investment. If you're speculating on it, on the value increasing in terms of US dollars, then that's really only another way of saying that the US dollar has devalued. So if you're thinking of it as an insurance or a hedge against some value of your savings instead of being denominated in US dollars, then that's a thing, but it's different than an investment.
And I know where that's coming from. I mean, there's a lot of marketers that have podcasts that are claiming the world is going to end and you should move to Puerto Rico or wherever. I mean, they're just getting affiliate money to sell gold, right? They're just putting their customers to this white label system, and that's why they're doing it. They're selling fear, right? No
Yeah.
difference than what the media does.
Oh, there's a lot of fear for sale. There's no doubt about that. So just, I don't know that I want to spend a ton of time on this, but you mentioned it. So could you just cover for me? I'm not familiar. What are primary, secondary, and tertiary markets in class A, B, and C as it comes to real estate?
So my first few units that I bought, I was living up in Seattle at the time, and I didn't know all the stuff about rent to value ratio, primary, secondary, tertiary markets. But Seattle, all of California, Hawaii, New York, Boston, it's all primary markets. Typically, you're not gonna find cash flow. It's 2020 and beyond. You're not gonna find cash flow there unless you go to like the hood, right? Like Baltimore or something like that. Primary markets are cool places to live, right? I mean, people want to live there. You're not going to have the rent to value ratio necessary to be able to cash flow. So we look for properties that are at least 1% rent to value ratio, and simply find that by going the monthly rent divided by the purchase price. So a lot of the homes that we have people start off with are $100,000 houses that rent for $1,000 a month. 1,000 divided by 100,000. Here in Hawaii, you'll be lucky to find a $600,000 house that you can rent for 2,500 a month. That's less than 0.5%. No, not gonna work, right? And you can do this real simply. Just go to Zillow. I mean, Zillow's not the greatest information, but you'll get good enough ballpark, right? You can kind of run these numbers. And if you're living in a primary market, like most of my clients, like the Bay Area, where they make these nice salaries, they can't invest locally. So the only really option if you want cash flow is to go remote. And course, that's where people drop like fries, right? Because they're afraid of not investing where they live.
Got it. So that's secondary, tertiary. And then what does class A, B, and C mean?
So class A, B, and C is essentially like the one of the biggest indicators is like when it was built. Like something that's newer than a decade or a couple of decades is considered class A. B is something built in the 1980s. Class C is older. I wouldn't really want to be hanging around during the daytime. Um, Class B, it's cool to be there in the daytime, but I wouldn't want to be there at nighttime, right? Like Class A, you're going to have young females running around at night, right? Exercising. You're not going to have that in Class B. But, you know, on the high end, you're not going to find cash flow. On the low end, you're going to have cash flow, but you're going to have a lot of problems with collection. You're going to have a lot of deadbeat tenants. So we try and stay in the middle, right? The Class B type of area. That's where you get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of valuations.
That's the sweet
spot. Sweet spot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so just along I was trying to do some mental math here, and it's not working while I'm trying to listen to you. So the idea of somebody trying to build passive income to replace their active income, or just grow cash flow. So let's just take a round number. If I have $100,000 a year salary, what I guess market value in real estate do I need to accumulate that would replace $100,000 in passive income?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's break it down on a monthly basis, right? So I think that's what, about $8,000.
Let's call it 10 grand a month.
10 grand a month. So, I mean, that's a number that I think a lot of people try and get to, right? Obviously, once you get there, your net worth and your amount of cash flow will continue to grow. That's the cool thing about this whole thing. But I would say if you're buying, $100,000 house that rents for $1,000, you should be able to cash flow a few $100 from each of those properties. So you're probably looking about 30 houses or so, fully leveraged, right? Once you pay them off, the cash flow will get stronger. But I started down this path. I started to buy in Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis, and to buy these type of houses. But then I realized that to get past 20 to 30 houses, it starts to become a job. Even though I fully advocate for doing 100% property management, right? Those guys do your dirty work for you. You're just managing the manager. But right when I got to be about 11 houses, I realized, and I started to join different masterminds, get around other accredited investors, other doctors, lawyers, engineers, 10, 30 years older than myself. And they were investing in these private equity opportunities, syndications. And that was kind of my progression into getting into these country club type deals. But everybody's a little bit different, right? When everybody comes into this journey to passive cash flow along a different stage, right? Like if you're a younger guy whose net worth is under $250,000, just keep plugging away at buying single family homes, right? As soon as you can save up 20, 30 grand for a down payment on a $100,000 house, buy one, right? And that was my first step. When I started in 2009, and I was still buying single family homes until 2015. So I think that's what people don't realize. I mean, maybe your podcast audience totally gets it, right? The grit and the grind, and to kind of keep doing it again, day in and day in and day in. And then after a while, you hit that hockey stick. But for the first 5 or 6 years, it's slow, right? I mean, this is not a get rich quick thing, but it's a get rich surely thing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It takes time, and so I appreciate that perspective and that reality on it. So if you're making 100K and you're looking to replace that, and it takes 20 or 30 properties to get there, if it's 20% down type of thing, you're probably talking about investing about 500 or 600,000. So it's going to take some time, right? In terms of,
I mean, most of my clients on the low end, they're able to put away like $30,000 into savings or retirement, and at that point, you're able to buy one house a year.
Yep.
Like I said, you won't go past 5 or 10 of them. That's just impractical, right? It'll go into more scalable types of investments. But just with that premise in mind, like you continue to feed the beast. Every year you can save more and more and more, right? Soon you're buying 2 every year. But after a while, like most of my clients, they're able to get upwards to $50 to $100,000 of saving per year, which you're able to buy more assets that produce even more cash flow. And that's where this problem, where it's not a problem, but this kind of feed falls forward on itself a little bit, which is good. And then, yeah, after I would say most professionals that are able to save at least 30 grand a year, I mean, you can be out of the rat race within a decade
Right.
easily.
Right. Okay. No, good. What's your, I love to ask this when I talk to people like you and what you're focused on. What's your philosophy on, so you talked about using leverage and debt in cash flow properties, but what about your home? Do you believe in owning a home, and what's your philosophy on mortgage on your residence?
Depends where you live, right? Like if you're in a primary market where the rent to value ratios are under 1%, I definitely think that you should rent. And this goes again. I mean, my mom gives me crap all the time. You should buy a place to live. I don't. It makes no sense to me, right? Especially in Hawaii, right, where the not the prices are high. That's one thing, but the rent to value ratios are so poor here. To me, I think buying a house is one of the worst things a young couple, under the age of 30 or 35 can do these days, because you have to put all this money into a down payment, and where you could have bought 5, 6 rental properties with that money, and now you're saddled with this big mortgage payment, and then that cuts your cash flow. Cash flow gives you options, right, to invest, to get you out of the rat race. But now when it's going to this house, um, when you put money into your house as an equity, like it just grows with the pace of inflation, which is nothing, right? And I think I have this video on my YouTube channel where I break down how much money you're making, right, with cash flow, mortgage pay down, appreciation, and the tax benefits, and you're making upwards from 20 to 30% a year. For those engineers in the group that is all numbers, I mean, that just tells the story right there, right?
Right. I mean, those are huge numbers, right? Again, if we go back to a traditional financial planner, and there's probably only one that I know of for sure that listens to this show that we can offend, but 7% looks like,
Yeah.
over the course of an investing career, looks like a good number in that scheme.
And that's where, like, when I was first starting doing this, I was calculating how much I made, because I mean, I used to be an engineer. This is what we do on the weekends, right? And I was like, what the heck? Like, I'm not that great of an investor. How am I getting so high returns prudently with cash flow? That my tenant's paying down my mortgage, my equity position keeps going up, and yet why am I only getting like 8% in like S&P 500 or whatever? Like, who took all my money, right? There's something going on here, right? It's kind of like the whole, like, maybe your guys will totally understand this, but like it's a whole big pharma thing. It's like the big egg companies, right? It's another like thing out there. Like, it's almost like the system is engineered to keep us locked in their day jobs for 30, 40, 50 years, right? If you just invested in rental properties, one by one, and then do syndications once your net worth improves, you'll be out of the rat race in 10 years. And you, unfortunately, wouldn't be a contributor to society, but who cares, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any big conspiracy theory, but this is, the last 150 years, industrialized capitalism. That is the design, right? It's a leverage model where you need people who have an employee mindset because you need employees.
Right.
So you don't necessarily teach people how to be entrepreneurs and business owners.
But there's nothing easier than owning a little portfolio of rental properties.
So when that portfolio starts to grow, as you said, and good problem to have, when it starts to tip over and you don't want to be painting the walls for the next guy to move in on your 10th or 8th or 20th property, what's next? So what does that next level look like in sort of this private equity country club group that I think you've moved into that? What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, even when had my first rental property, I was never painting houses or doing any of that. I don't know how to do eviction, to be honest. The property manager does all that. I don't know. I don't know anything about toilets or whatever. But when I had 11 rental properties, I started to find that these groups of people, maybe about 50, 100 people, would put together these syndications, all through SEC filings, Reg D 506B or 506C, and they would pool their money together and they would go buy a property that was a pretty good deal, because it was sort of out of reach by the mom and pop investors who kind of peter out at 20 to 50 units. certainly they can't really afford anything higher than 2 million. But then we would stay below the institutions who are just looking to place, Wall Street capital at lower returns, so maybe below 10 million. So there's a nice sweet spot of 50 unit, 250 unit apartment buildings that these private equity groups would go after. And the big thing would be they could go in with speed. They could raise all the capital from their group, raise the down payment, the rehab money, and they would go get a bank loan. And then, people don't realize, you get Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans for your residential properties. But the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans, when you get into the $1 million space on these bigger deals, it's just phenomenal. One of the big things is non-recourse debt. Is and that's where I started to get the wheels turning. It's like, why is the government helping these country club type people? Well, that's the way the government stimulates and helps this problem that the country has, that we need more average person housing. Right? There's a housing crisis in America where, especially for for the bell curve of America, the guy making 40 to 60 grand a year, if that.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, there are incentives set up for sure. So why not play by the rules of the game as they're being incented?
Right.
So tell me more about what you're doing through Simple Passive Cash Flow. Are you creating the funds that are going out and doing investing, or what's your role now?
Yeah, so I have kind of two sides of my business. We have the operation side where we go out and acquire these large apartments and we pool investor money through the group. And then I also have more of the education side, the free podcasts or to help people get started. That's how initially this all started was, my friends would ask me back in 2012, 2015, like how I was buying these properties in Birmingham, but I never visited them. And, they kind of saw how my life was changing. I mean, this stuff changed my life 10 years ago. No longer working my day job as an engineer. That people would ask me, but no one would ever do anything about it. Right? Like, how do you get fit? Well, you do this, but nobody does it, right? So I just started to record it, and other people would pick it up, and I started to build a following. And kind of in the beginning, it started off as just more tactical, buying rental properties, but it then kind of evolved into more of syndications and private placements. And what are accredited investors doing? What are they doing for tax, legal? How do you create your family office for yourself?
Yeah, and so maybe to put like a little bit of perspective on this, so even for people who've done quite well in their careers, whether that's just somebody with high earning potential, or somebody who's built a business and has transacted, or they've got some significant value in that business that they're going to exit at some point. That takes work to build, and it doesn't necessarily grow exponentially. Sometimes it does. But to put this in perspective, so you've been at it for about 10 years or so, and correct me if this is wrong, but so you've been able to, through your funds and your groups, acquired over $250 million worth of real estate.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? I mean, random people just kind of meeting up with other random people, but it's kind of like salsa dancing, right? Like when you know how to dance and you're in the club, these things come together so quickly, right? But it was this huge paradigm shift of people who are just totally outside of the group that are totally not aware of this stuff, and they're just buying one-off single-family homes here, there, right? I just got lucky enough. I mean, I kind of paid to be in different mastermind groups, so I got around the right people. But I never had anybody in my peer group who did this stuff. My parents never owned rental property. It's hard. Right? I think when your net worth gets to be higher than $500,000, just saying your net worth is your net worth is so much more true.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton to be said about who you're hanging around and what kind of ideas pop out of that, or opportunities, or just stimulating conversations. And yeah, I mean, whether you went out and acquired some of this knowledge by making the investment in it yourself, now you've synthesized that and you've brought it back, whether it's in the educational format of what you do with your podcast, or through what's the deal pipeline club that you have? Is that on the investment side of things?
Yeah, that's more on the investment side, and we're big on like building a community. I mean, we have a free Facebook group. People want to join, they can check that out on the website. But of course, we try to do some events when we can have events. We bring people out to Hawaii and And I think that's where you I encourage people to build relationships with each other. I always say, like, unfortunately, the advice you normally hear in terms of investing is go on like a free forum or go to a local RIA. But unfortunately for accredited investors, people make good money. Those are some of the worst places to go because they attract that, that get rich quick, younger guy. I mean, we're all there. I was there at one time, but a lot of these groups are like people trying to get rich or wholesaling houses, flipping houses, and it's just not what like high paid working professionals or people whose time is more valued doing something else than taking a more active role in real estate.
Yeah, I think particularly for folks who have spent some significant portion of time and effort growing what they have, there's an appreciation that hitting that home run very quickly is either luck or very, very rare. It takes time, and it really is a matter of not necessarily looking for some massive multiple. It's about doing maybe several things intelligently, and letting this stuff build and grow over time.
And a lot of this stuff is private, right? Because it's your own financial well-being. It's the only way to do it is to build organic relationships with people that you can call your peers and your buddies to, and this is where you build that peer group of people who are using the CARES Act to take 100 grand early with, with penalty free out of their 401k to jailbreak that out, invested in, real assets. Or, they're using land conservation easements to drive their AGI under $300,000, or using bonus depreciation via cost segregation from deals to lower their AGI, and then using other strategies like real estate professional status on taxes, right? Like this, you don't get this in cubicle land, for sure, right? You get put money to your 401k, lower your AGI. Like no, we don't do that here.
So just a question on qualified plans. So I get your earlier point of your belief in this cash flow asset of real estate over like an equities play. But what about holding cash flow real estate underneath something like a checkbook 401k or IRA?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, right? Like it's a big gamble whether taxes are going to be higher in the future or now, right? So I got a few points. So the first point is like me personally, and I think for a lot of my members, your tax bracket is going to be much higher in the future. That's why I plan, right? Like trying to grow my net worth and grow things, right? Where normal traditional personal finance is like, you're going to lower your how much money you make, right? Because then you'll eventually shrivel up and die and live a meager life. That's not what we believe, right? We believe the future is brighter. We're going to live a larger life. So your tax bracket will be higher. Number two, right, like to pay for all the stimulus money, how also they're going to do it, but then raise taxes, raise the tax bracket, right? Um, just on those 2 points alone, I mean, it makes sense to pull the money out, pay your taxes today, get it out of that stuff. So you're not, essentially the government has a lien on your money when you got it into those 401ks, which is a big paradigm shift, somebody told me. I was like, that was a little facetious, but in a way you're very true. But then the last one is, the nice thing about real estate is like the tax benefits, right? For those of you guys who own rental properties, you're able to write off the property over 27 years, the building, the improvement value of it. But on these syndications where they're large enough, we'll do a cost segregation and we'll be able to write off a third of the building in year one. It's phenomenal. They call it bonus depreciation. It's a rather newer thing that came out in the last administration, but this allows us to extract a huge amount of that loss in the first year. So this is the game that we all, as private equities investors, do. We go into a deal, maybe even on Christmas Day, like 5 days left in the year, and we extract all the depreciation losses for that entire year, 1/3 of the building, boom. I've seen it, investor invests 100 grand, maybe they get 60 to even over $100,000 in passive losses on their year one K1. It's phenomenal. Unfortunately, you don't get that if you're investing via a 401k, solo 401k, self-directed Roth, QRP. That's why I would rather invest cash first. There's a couple of scenarios where I would use a retirement account. Um, this is getting a little advanced. Like I think that it comes into play when you're kind of getting to end game. You have enough passive income coming in every month, $10,000-$20 a month. You can't possibly spend it. Then I would go fund like a Roth IRA account, right? But people are doing this obviously the opposite way, right? They're funding that future money, and they don't fund today's cash flow bucket, and because they're not investing in the right things, they'll never get to the future, right?
Right.
The other situation is when I will use QRPs or that type of stuff is if a client doesn't have any liquidity to invest, they don't have any home equity to invest, and all they have is their big nest egg, their retirement accounts. And unfortunately, they make over $300,000-$400,000 a year at their day job. They're kind of screwed, because if they take money out of their retirement funds, now it shows up as active taxable income. It may make sense to do a checkbook IRA in that case, but every situation is a little bit different.
Yeah. No, those are great points. And I did not know about the 1/3 bonus depreciation on these syndicated investments. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, nobody wants you to know that. Just keep investing in single family homes and take it over 27 years, right?
Yeah.
And this is why like nobody does 1031s in my sphere. Like let Biden take it. I don't care. Like we don't care, right? When we get bonus depreciation, these big losses in the first year, we're able to effectively 1031 because we can pocket those passive losses and use it strategically when we want.
Yep.
And this is awesome for an entrepreneur who has big swings in AGI, right? Maybe in 1 year when it jumps up, then you want to use those passive losses strategically. Maybe when you have a bad year, or maybe strategically you want a stay-at-home spouse, right? This gets into lifestyle creation there. Maybe you pocket
not to get too far into the tax side of things, but you can carry that forward, and does it carry as a net operating loss? Is that what it looks like through the K1?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
It's
have
not,
my tax guy.
Well, to put it this way, like one thing that pops to mind is on a capital gain or loss, I think you get limited to something like $3,000 a year that you can keep applying year over year. This is not that. It sounds like you've got a bigger number that you can choose to use or carry
Here's
forward.
how I kind of understand it. Like you have active gains, right? And I believe the net operating losses are kind of like active losses.
Got it.
That's in one category. In the other category where I try to live is passive gains, which come from the investment, and then passive losses.
Right.
So passive losses come from depreciation or bonus depreciation. So you can't, what the strategy will play sometimes for some folks is we'll use those passive losses to offset their active big W-2 income or their big business income, right? But there's normally a barrier there, and you can't pass the barrier unless you have real estate professional status,
right,
with 750 hours of active participation.
Right.
But every situation is different, right? Consult your CPA, but we try and empower our folks to ask their CPA the right questions, or more importantly, direct them to what they want. Because most CPAs out there, not they don't, well, maybe they probably don't know, but they're kind of lazy, right? I mean, I was like this when I was an engineer. I just tried to do the least as possible.
Right. Well, yeah, the standard approach is easier because you know it and it's routine. Going off script to figure out something new takes more time.
And there's a little bit of more like audit risk, right? But if you're following the rules, like what is there to be worried about?
Right. Yeah, you're playing by the rules. So maybe just a couple more things on Outlook, and then how people can tune into you for more if they're interested. So in terms of your outlook, I mean, you described when you started investing in real estate in really kind of the last bust. So you've had a nice run. I mean, equity markets have gone boom and bust since the mid 90s, and they're at another all-time high. The problem is, unless you've got something that's very heavily dividend related and no guarantees that companies are going to continue to cash flow dividends, real estate may boom and bust, but I don't think rental dollars bust the same way. So what have you seen from the last sort of bust to today's boom? And what do you think about when you look ahead? Do you think about inflation, deflation, or are you just kind of looking at cash flow? What does that look like to you?
Well, big picture, I mean, inflation is going to come, right? I don't think it's going to come in the next 5 years, probably later. But like, to me, you want to lock up as much debt as possible. I mean, we're just trying to find yield deals that cash flow that we can lock up at. Like, I mean, last week I got quoted at 2.9%, which is right. It's phenomenal, right? Like, it's pretty easy to hit a profit when you lock up debt like that. But like, I think people think of real estate and they clump it in with all these house flippers or strippers buying 5 houses like they had in The Big Short. And that's not what we're doing, right? We're buying prudent cash flow streams that in hard times they should be able to still cash flow and outlast that. I mean, the last recession was a real estate crash. There were huge things going wrong, right? Ninja loans and all this stuff. It's not the case. It's even hard for a lot of my high paid clients to get loans these days, which is great. It's a great thing. I think right now the stock market is pretty frothy. It's obviously like all the stimulus money that got put in, and anything also another thing that's going on behind the scenes. The government's buying a lot of the debt and the bonds and all these companies, which it pops everything up. Um, I don't know. I mean, you can still keep playing that game, but to me, I got off of that bus a long time ago. I don't care about the stock market. I don't watch it one bit, and I just go on fundamentals. Like, there's a housing crisis. There's people that need to live in $800 to $1,000 apartments. Good quality housing, Class B, for the workforce of America. The demand will always be there, and I want to focus on that niche. I mean, look, through COVID, like normally we average 97% collections. You're always gonna have a few deadbeats, so you assume that. But through COVID, maybe it dropped to like the mid 90s, and we're still making money if we can stay above 60%. So there's a huge buffer in how much things it could have gotten worse. And to me, like going through COVID, it's like I'm even more confident in this strategy. Like, why
Yeah,
would you want to?
that's great to take a 100-year event like this, take that kind of hit, and you still got that much buffer.
Right, right. I mean,
So
you're not going to make huge returns. You're not going to double your money in 1 or 2 years. But to me, I mean, most times I think LPs, passive investors, are looking to double my money every 5 or 6 years, pretty prudently with cash flow. Still a lot better than what you get on the retail market, right? Stocks, mutual funds.
yeah, the old rule 72, right? So if you take that 7 or 8%, you're talking about 7 or 8 years, or however that works. No, 9 years, right? So great. Yeah, that's faster, and you still got something that's a real asset. Rents tend to grow over time, regardless of what the market value is if you decide to unwind the real estate. So what's next? I mean, how often do you put together funds? Do they go in tranches? Are they closed end? What kind of investment do you look for? And where can people find out more detail if they'd like to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we kind of focus more on light value add type of opportunities that are stabilized. So stabilized is defined as 90% occupied or more. So we can get that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, non-recourse debt in front of their big requirements. So essentially a property that's nothing's wrong with it, working fine, making a lot of money already day one. But there's some kind of, we look for the twist is like some kind of owner that needs to sell because of some situation. So we don't buy problem properties. We buy properties with owners with problems, or they're just retiring or moving on. So that's kind of what we're looking for, just to buy good yield cash flowing properties with the ability to maybe change out the flooring, new appliances, but when they put up $4,000 to $6,000 a rehab per unit, and then bump the rents up $100 at least. That's kind of the bread and butter. It takes time, right? Because you're not kicking people out. You're only doing it as they naturally turn over. So it's kind of like a slow flip in a way. But cash flow in the interim, and then if the economy slows down or another pandemic happens, you continue the cash flow, right? And maybe you get the construction done for cheaper because everybody's looking for work, right? It's a hybrid strategy. You can kind of take it both ways. I think you hear a lot, like, single family homes, you might have a lot of foreclosures, or there might be a lot of distress coming out once the PPP idle loans kind of make their way through their system. To me, I mean, again, I buy stabilized assets, not problem properties. I probably wouldn't buy those anyway. I'm sure for other more vulture-ish funds, they would have a lot more opportunities. But my buy box is, I only swing on the inside corner, look to left, right? That's all I do, right? I don't go outside my strikes. I know what my pitch is. But I definitely think that there's more distressed inventory coming out for those more opportunistic type of investors. But I'm just not one of those. I'm more buying whole cash flow.
Yeah, no, I like it. So, so what does that look like? How often are you putting groups of investors together? What kind of investment do you look for?
Probably, I mean, whenever deals come out, really. I mean, sometimes they can go through a dry spell, right? um, Through COVID, I mean, we had to literally stay at home. We couldn't tour properties, and lending kind of froze up for about 3 to 4 months. So we're kind of now getting right back out there. But maybe a few years, what I kind of do, it's mostly my cadence as an investor too, right? I want to be kind of dollar cost averaging the market. I always want to be putting money into deals, because as I put a deal into one, it kind of restabilizes. As we take over a property, get a new sheriff is in town, and then it restabilizes 6 months, and then kind of go into another one. But ultimately, kind of like always rolling through that and feel my portfolio. But what I want to be doing is kind of building a syndication ladder where, how your grandpa would do a CD ladder, right? Have them cash out at different points. That's what I'm doing, right? So that I always have a huge amount of passive losses to offset these capital gains when I have to pull out the income and cash it in. So I really
Got
never
it.
pay taxes.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I
and
think I got it. So you're
and that way it's
laddering.
like, yeah,
Go ahead.
that way it's not like, you just kind of keep rolling it, right? Keep the good times rolling in terms of taxes too.
Yeah. No, it's good to be cognizant of that. So when you're so you're laddering those, but is it one round of fundraising, one fund, one LLC per property that you
Yeah,
spot?
individual deals, because a lot of our folks, they like to underwrite that deal, right? For some reason, they may not like it, and that's cool, right? If you don't like it, you don't like it. Or you want to invest in something else with somebody else, or you want to take the money and go buy a house, right? Go buy a doodad, right? Like a jet ski or a cool car. Cool, that's what money is for, right? But to me, like, I'm not a big fan of like they call them blind pool funds, where an operator will just get a boatload of money, invest in a bunch of stuff. I think the nice thing about that is like it's diversified, but the dark side is like, kind of like a hot dog, right? Just parts of the cow nobody wants, right? And it's really hard from an investor's perspective to kind of figure out what's going on. We will normally do like monthly reports. We write a little narratives. People, if they want to, they can feel like they're involved a little bit. They can know what's happening, the good and the bad. Most investors don't, find it, but it's there, right? To kind of see, some people, at least they want to see the profit and loss statement and see, here's the income, here's the expense, here's the bottom line this month. Cool, that apartment made 50 grand last month. Awesome. I can go play golf now.
Right. I imagine you probably have people tune in, maybe a little bit at the beginning, and then kind of, okay, great, it's under control. I tune out. So, like, what's a good place for people to connect with you and have a discussion about if there's interest, is there a mutual fit and interest on both sides, and then stay in the loop as you start to find opportunities and look for investors?
Yeah, they can build a relationship with me. My email is Lane@SimplePassiveCashflow. You can learn all about my story, and especially if you're looking to get single family homes on your own. If your net worth is not quite to $500,000, that's how I would suggest starting out. Just buy rental properties. Unfortunately, they probably won't be local to where you are. You're gonna have to go with a remote, like a turnkey rental or something like that. But a lot of the first dozen podcasts were all about buying turnkey rentals, so it's a great place to look there. But check out my website. Got a whole bunch of articles and about syndications and turnkey rentals there. But yeah, always kind of looking to build a relationship, right? That's kind of the big thing.
Yeah, great. So simplepassivecashflow.com, can reach out to you by email there. And then what's that sort of that step or that threshold to, is it folks that are ready to invest 100K at a time besides being accredited? What's kind of the investment level you look for when people might want to jump into one of your funds?
Yeah, normally we try and stay below 100 investors. So if the normal capital raise is anywhere from 5 million to 10 million, we're trying to put the minimums around $50,000 about there. Um, and I would say, like, we're not a big shop, right? We don't do monthly distributions. We People like to invest because our overhead is low, right? Because it's like a wholesale. It's not retail investment like Wall Street is, where how else do they pay for all these big buildings and super fancy portals that have animated pie graphs and stuff like that?
But they take me golfing.
I guess. Or they say, well, he was a nice guy. Well, that nice guy was a non-value add other than making you feel good, right? A lot of investors, they just want the bare minimum in terms of administration because they want to pocket that as return.
Yeah. No, I'd rather have the money go to work.
Yeah. And they also want the relationship with the operator, right? They want to know the principals personally, which you can't do that when you may own a lot of Apple stock, but you don't go to the company, you don't know people personally, right? And I think that's the nice thing about real estate is you know people. It's a relationship business.
Yeah, and again, it's a real asset. You can touch it, see it,
Right.
that type of thing. Okay, great. Well, I appreciate the time, the information. I'll make sure to get the links you mentioned up there. And then if somebody just wants to, if they're already they love listening to podcasts and they just want to tune into your podcast, tell me again what it's called and the best place to find it.
Yeah, so Simple Passive Cashflow is the podcast, and especially if you finish a Spartan race, you must be a hard worker. So totally willing to connect with.
Yeah.
SimplePassiveCashflow.com.
Yeah, no, those are all my I call them my participation medals. I haven't won one, but I've participated in a lot, and I grind it out. Right, we're talking about grinding it out.
Yeah, I mean, it like a lot of my investors, they're hard chargers, right? They're not like sit in their cubicle, eat a bunch of snacks in the day, right? Never exercise. Like, trying to, I mean, it's the total package, right? Wealth, health, and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate that you took the time to come on because I really do think about integrated human development. Yeah, we need to take care of ourselves in the way we eat, exercise, sleep, hydrate, all those kind of things. But, fueling our mind, going out and making sure our wealth is taken care of for our future and maybe future generations or whatever legacy you want to leave behind. Also very, very important. So Lane, again, appreciate all the information. Thanks for taking my questions, and thank you for taking the time to share with the audience.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah, my pleasure. Take care. All right, thank you again to Lane on that one. I really appreciate his time and his wisdom, his knowledge that he shared. But not only that, his patience in my getting this episode out. We actually recorded it, man, quite some time ago, back in the middle of COVID and quarantine. We just had so many cool guests to get through the production process, and release episodes. So just getting this one to the surface. But I know how I got feedback and how popular the episode was on passive real estate income through land. So I've been excited to get this one out for a while with Lane. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and hope you learned as much as I did from Lane. Make sure you go check out his free Facebook page, his podcast, the information he's got, very educational. And of course, feel free to reach out to him if you want more information about how he works with people directly. You can find the links to Lane and all of his information in the show notes for this episode, manofmastery.com/078 for episode 78, manofmastery.com/078. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. You know what to do. It's all about taking action. So get out there, figure out how this one potentially fits your life. Integrated development, fuel your mind. Take something away from this one, whether it's with Lane directly or not, whether it's with real estate directly or not. But hopefully this sparks an idea, and more importantly, sparks some action. So get out there, get after it.